12:01 Sunday morning. That is when funding for the government officially runs out, barring some miracle of bipartisan cooperation. So there is less than 72 hours to go until what would be the fourth government shutdown since 2013. Marketplace's David Brancaccio spoke with the editor-in-chief of The Economist magazine, Zanny Minton-Beddoes, who argues this shutdown drama is ultimately missing the point. Here's David.
What do you make of our federal budget mess over here right now? President Biden signed a law a few months ago which capped dollars for the things that Congress can actually have a say over. Seemed like there was some order being brought to this process, but I'm not seeing order.
It's a circus all over again. But what actually worries me much more about the US is not the consequences of a shutdown, which would be, of course, terrible for the people involved. But the bigger picture problem is that the US economy, which, you know, is not in recession and we're at peacetime, is running a 7% of GDP budget deficit. And bond yields have risen. They're now, about 4.5%. So the debt service cost is becoming a real problem. The last time the US had bond yields where they were now, I think debt was about 35% of GDP. It's now 98%. So the cost of the US debt is growing dramatically. The deficit is the highest it's been in peacetime. That's what worries me.
Yeah, and people should remember, you just mentioned it quickly, which is that if we were in a terrible recession, it might make some sense to run up the deficit a little further. But this is not a recession.
The economy is not in recession. Unemployment is incredibly low. So to be running this scale of deficit right now is really reckless. And the problem is that, as you know, David, it's not really because of the spending that the folks in Washington are arguing about right now. It's not about what's called discretionary spending. It's really about two things, primarily entitlements, the cost of spending on Social Security and Medicare. And actually, looking forward, it's also about tax revenue, because if you remember, Donald Trump cut taxes. Those taxes, they're going to expire under current law in 2025. So all of the projections that are made right now about where the deficit and where the debt are going to be going forward assume that those taxes will end in 2025, those tax cuts. And you know DC politics better than I do, but I'd be very, very surprised if all of the Donald Trump's tax cuts were rolled back, especially the ones for the middle class.
So you're not at some level applauding dissident Republicans who are dragging their heels on this stuff?
No, I'm not, because they're focusing on the wrong thing. I think that what we have now is a whole load of drama about something that doesn't matter, which is the relatively short-term part of discretionary spending. And we have no appetite on either side, and certainly not amongst the Republicans, to really deal with what does matter. So no, I don't think this drama is a substitute for a serious discussion about U.S. fiscal policy.
Zanny Minton-Beddoes, editor-in-chief of The Economist. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was Marketplace's David Brancaccio there. In New York, I'm Sabri Ben-Achour with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.